This is a recording I made because your prof sent you an email on Wednesday saying that his voice and it was coughing and so on and wouldn't be able to teach the class on Wednesday. Now, this is a course which has 4 sections. There's 2 on Wednesday and 2 on Friday. So just to match up everybody, make sure everybody was able to learn the right thing, and as a backup contingency plan also, I'm going to make some commentary on Chapter 5 content on the website, um, which will help those people who missed having the class on Wednesday and will also contribute to the people who did get to the class on Friday, so you all kind of match up as to what are the main points that would have been discussed in Chapter 5. Now, I'll start by saying talking about this section on international trade theories is not something that I would teach about, because that's actually 11 years old and out of date, and we don't really talk about theory in this course. This course is done at Seneca College, and it's a lot more practical than a theoretical course taught at a university. But the point about the market orientation is very significant, and there's 3 types of them: product, sales, and marketing. And you would have learned that in MRK 106, and it's a big thing to review that and make sure you understand it because it relates to international business. So in international business, you might have an example of a company going to another country overseas and talking about their product by explaining the FABs, the features, advantages, and benefits. So buy this product because it's really good quality, or buy this product because it's made from a certain type of material. That's a product orientation. And then a sales orientation is a little bit more advanced level, where you presume the person already knows about the product from previous advertising by your company and other companies. And the way to convince them to buy your product is because you've got a better price. So that's what a sales orientation is. You just say, buy this product because it's $10 off, and you get 10 days in order to think about whether or not you want to bring it back or not. That's the sales orientation. Now, marketing orientation requires you to know something a little bit about the customer and ask them some questions. So in international business, a marketing orientation would be things that you do on your company website and in your promotions material to talk to the customer and say, look, if you have this kind of problem and if you have this kind of interest, then this product would match you. So that's what it means by saying a marketing orientation. You find out what the person is actually potentially interested in, and then that's what you talk about in relation to why the person should buy the product. Okay, further on here. And the other thing too in this section, week 5, is talking about first mover advantages and second mover advantages. The examples I always use is Google and Yahoo. Nobody ever uses the word Yahoo to go look up something. For instance, you may be having a conversation with somebody about a sports event or a game or something like that, and someone says, yeah, I'll Google it when I get home. Nobody says I'm going to Yahoo it, even though Yahoo was the first search engine. So how did Google become better than Yahoo? Well, they had a different algorithm. And first of all, Google was also founded by some people who had PhDs in mathematics and computer science and wrote an algorithm which was a lot more advanced. So if you type a word into Google, you're going to get more hits, more returns, and more detail compared to Yahoo. Also, the business model for Yahoo was a little bit old-fashioned. It was kind of like a newspaper. You know, you type in the word cheese and you get 7 million hits, all about cheese recipes and types of cheese and so on. And then you'd also have some advertising off of the side. There'd be a horoscope information. There'd be weather information. A very sort of clouded page. And that was the original search engine everybody used. But Google came along and did a little bit better. Their algorithm works so if you type in the word cheese, you get 7 billion hits. So that's why I talked about sometimes in business these days, it's not enough to try to be the first company to come to market with the product, but rather be the first to be successful and last longer. And sometimes you can look at the mistakes of an earlier company and say, okay, we're going to also get in the market, but we're going to avoid the problems that they had, and we're going to change our services and our products slightly differently to be more effective. And also we have the wisdom of knowing what happened to the first mouse. He's dead. That's why the second mouse gets the cheese. That's the meaning of the joke, is that the first mouse went out and tried something and was not successful, and the second mouse got a chance to watch and avoid the trap and save money and production costs and manufacturing by doing things differently. So that's why I did those 2 videos there. Now I'm just going to go a little bit further to what you're going to do next week with the political environment, which is a big section. There's all kinds of things to talk about in the context of the political environment. And there's actually about 4 or 5 different web pages talking about them. So let's just look at the first one here. This is dealing with laws, rules, regulations, and how it is affected by the different other environments. Here's one talking about the politics between North American companies and Chinese companies, and also how the technological environment affects different things. An example of a situation here where restaurants had to accommodate people for medicinal marijuana smokers, and so on. So politics and the environments. So then what I want to do is then talk about, I'll click here and I'll click political risk. So political risk is the things that happen to a business when they're operating in a country where there's threat of terrorism or civil war or breakdown or the economy collapse or so on. And we talk in this category about things like business continuity, disaster recovery, country risk analysis, and so on. So this section begins talking about what is risk and what are some of the different types of risk, like confiscation, expropriation, nationalization, and also to personnel. Don't forget that when we're talking about international business, we're talking about people going places. And there's a risk to people traveling. There's a risk to disease, there's a risk to accidents, there's a risk to terrorism, the transportation of vehicles themselves, and so on. So then we also talk in political risk about conflict and violence and economic instability, currency repatriation, and so on. And the example of Venezuela. And here's some examples of what are the types of risks and threat situations. Equipment, kidnapping, robbery, and I'll give you some examples in class when I repeat part of this later. The situation of the Somali pirates is a good example of a risk situation, and the origin of that is actually interesting because the pirates did not wake up one day and say, oh, we're going to switch from being fishermen to being pirates. It didn't happen that way. What happened was the fishermen off the coast of Somalia were going about their business responsibly, minding their own business, just trying to get as much fish as possible, and found that a lot of these large boats of product coming from Japan, South Korea, China, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, all these countries here which produce products which are sold in Europe here, take this route. They go through Singapore, the narrow gap here, they go around the southern part of India, then they go across the tip of Somalia, then they go up here into the canal, into the Mediterranean. Right? And what the Somalian fishermen were noticing was, as these boats were coming through here to get up into this region, they were dumping a lot of garbage into the ocean, which was affecting the fishing, and they were very upset about that. So a few of them decided to pull up alongside these giant ocean line freighting boats and then talk to them and realize there's very few people on board. So they decided they could take the opportunity to then take control of the ship and then communicate to the ship owners and ask them for a bit of a ransom. And they found out that they're able to get away with that because there's no police on the ocean in that area. There's no such thing as a policeman on the ocean outside of territorial waters of countries. So they're able to get away with it. And that's how the pirates off the coast of Somalia originally developed. And sometimes it's useful to know things like that, because if you understand the historical origin, then you may have a different perspective or even somewhat sympathy for how things end up that way. And the rest of this stuff down here you could just basically read on your own. All right, going back to the top here. Okay, contingency planning. This is a big thing, and I have a little story actually talking about this, which is a video right here. This is actually a real class of mine I taught at U of T, and this little video here explains the background behind that and why they're writing it outside, and you'll find that fascinating in terms of how I came up with a way to solve a big problem. So contingency plans. What are the things that you need for a contingency plan? And also I used the example of what happens in a real situation. So I used a scenario of me falling down in the front of the class, and what would happen? 25 students would call 911 at the same time on their phone, and I say, no, that's not what you do. You plan in advance. One person calls 911. One person goes and gets the elevator and takes it down to the bottom floor. A third person who knows how to describe where the building is then would speak to the 911 operator and say, this is the building on campus and how to get here. So that's what contingency plans are, and I described that in great detail here about the different types of contingency plans. I would suggest that you read that thoroughly on your own so that when I do talk about it in class, it won't be difficult for you to follow along because there's many things to explain there. All right. Political risk, defensive versus integrative approach. This is another thing we talk about in terms of the political environment. And then lastly, personal risk situations. So this is me with some of my team in Jamaica at the Jamaican Defense Headquarters. So here we talk about personal risk situations that can happen when you're overseas, and I discuss it and show you how to log into the Canadian Embassy websites when you go to different places. An example of me being involved in a situation like that. And then I talk about grab bags and other things like that. And that's a section on political risk and contingency planning, which is in this part here. Okay. Also, this is a video talking about embassies, consulates, and high commissions, which some students have heard of before but not really understood the difference between the two. So this video talks about that as well. So I hope that's helpful. A summary of some of the points that would have been done in chapter number 4. The stuff on chapter number 5, because your professor was sick today, and what would be coming up for week 6.